Mr. Pond Boss, tell me how. Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, let's do it now. Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, you're the one that makes fishing so much fun. Well, I woke up this morning and I headed for my pond. Meeting Mr. Pond Boss, yeah, we're gonna chase the sun. Firing up old Sparky, show where the living breed. Hey, Mr. Pond.
Hello, everybody. Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss, checking in with you on this Wednesday evening. Glad you're joining us. Looks like we got a few folks already chiming in here. Dick Tabbert got his. Jim Fritchie. Hi, Bob. Glad you guys are on base here. Got a pretty cool show talking to you tonight, coming from the headquarters here of Pond Boss Magazine, Gordonville, Texas. We're going to talk about the exciting topic of pond aeration. Yep. So buckle your seat belts. We're going to talk about some fun stuff. Hey, we got a couple of longtime friends that decided they wanted to sponsor this show, which I'm pretty dadgum excited about that. Purina Mills. I've been working with those guys for a long, long time, and they've decided they want to sponsor our broadcast. So does Texas Hunter Feeders. You know, Purina Mills, I'll tell you these stories later on, but I've been working with them since 1995. We sent a letter out just to send it to Purina Mills in St. Louis, attention, whoever you're supposed to be. And they called us and they said, you know what? We really like the niche that you're figuring in, and we want to help you grow this industry. So what can we do to help you develop some fish foods? So we had a couple of meetings, and by gosh, they started developing some really cool fish foods. So we're glad to have Purina on board as a sponsor. Texas Hunter Feeders, glad to have them. You know, tonight I'm going to talk about aeration, and you know the drill here. Pond Boss Magazine. Please click like on this video and share it to your timeline. And hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. If you'll do that, you'll be entered into a drawing. And hey, you know what? Guess what? Last week, Scott Lindsay won. Hey, Scott, if you're watching this, we need your address. I can't find it. So we need your address to send you your goodies. Hey, guess who won this time? Dick Tabbert. Woo! You get a Pond Boss hat. Right there. And a mug. That'll be coming out to you. Just send us an email at info@pondboss. Well, wait a minute. You're a subscriber, so we'll have your address. So, I'm going to take a couple of minutes here and find you guys on my laptop so I can see what's going on here. And then I'll be looking and greeting everybody and finding out who's on board and be talking. So, I'm going to refresh the page. So that should allow me to see what's going on here. $35 a year for Pond Boss Magazine. 35 bucks. It's pretty cheap. Especially if you're going to be managing a pond. If you want to get some great tips on how to make your pond better, how to grow bigger fish, we can help you do that. Oh, there it is. I got you. I see it. Now I just got to blow it up. Make sure my speakers are off. I really need somebody to come in here and help me with this. I get to be the technician and the whole bit. All right, look at there. Joni Sefton. Hey, Joni, all the way from Brownstown, Illinois. Tell your husband Dave hello. Ron Bellamy. Jacob West. Yeah, Jacob, I was still the first to win that. Yeah, dude, you won. You were the first one to win a hat and a mug. I hope you're drinking coffee out of it and wearing the hat, buddy. You know, and you know what? Let's circle around. I need to talk to you. I want to catch up with you. We got to plan a trip to Kingfisher, and I want to see how your lake's doing. Scott Lindsay on board. Yeah, Hey, I need your address, Scott. Email me, info@pondboss.com. John Wilson. Hey, John, how your Cleveland Indians doing, buddy? I love watching your posts on Facebook. That's fabulous. Troy Todd is on board. Anthony Abate, Chicago area, Illinois. Jason Nepstad. Jason, I think you were first one up today. I hope your lake is doing well. I know you're getting to do a bunch of cool things with it. You know, tonight I do want to talk about aeration. So we're going to get that going. Let's see, Ron Bellamy done. Leanne is on board. Anthony, yours is on the way, she says. Leanne, she's the one in charge of sending that stuff. Victor Moberg, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine, attaboy. You know, one of the things, if you guys don't have a copy of the Pond Boss Resource Guide, you need it. So email us. We'll send you this for free. Actually, we'll send you a copy of the magazine for free so you can take a look at it. Danny Tolliver. Hello, Danny. Lance Fauber, you're on board. Glad to see you, buddy. You know, the thing about this resource guide, we publish it once a year. It's kind of a buyer's guide, and we vet all of our advertisers. And tonight, we're going to be talking about aeration. So I just want to take a minute and give you an idea of what all you've got in some of your resources. We got Aquatic, Lake and Pond Management. That's John Wilson. Those guys are experts. They work in the upper Midwest, Ohio, that area through there. Those guys are experts. Look them up. And they're also on our website. Let's see. Ron Bellamy would like a copy. Brian Lawrence, glad you're on board. Hey, Brian, glad you're here, Ron. Send us your email address or email us at info@pondboss.com. Okay, look here. I'm going to hold this graphic up so you can get it right there. Look at there, info@pondboss.com. That way, if you need to pause this video later and write it down, there you go. That's how you find us. And if you'll let us know, we'll send you a copy of this resource guide. We want to get the word out because there's some outstanding people out there. Aquadoc, fishpondaerator.com, Foster Lake and Pond Management. They're from North Carolina, longtime friends. You know, when Johnny Foster and I met, we both thought we invented the pond management business. We've been running parallel companies in businesses for a long, long time. Now, I know Johnny's been in it 35, 40 years. I've been in it almost 40 years. Fresh Flow, Casco Marine, Keaton Industries, Keystone Hatcheries, they sell aeration equipment. Louisiana Pond Management, Ken Russ down there in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Matala Aeration Products, they've got some pretty cool stuff. Matala, Natural Waterscapes, Otterbein and Barabo, they're good. Outdoor Water Solutions, John Red, John and Tanya, they have wind-driven aeration systems, but they're also expanding their market as well. Solitude and Vertex. Vertex, Casco, Aquadoc, long-time supporters of Pond Boss, and we're glad they're there. So what I want you to do, if you're thinking about aeration, contact one of our vendors, especially somebody that's near you that can help you do that, because there's a lot of science that goes on behind having the right kind of aeration system. Let's see here. Tory Rhodes has got a Vertex system. Ron Bellamy, thanks. Greg McBill got the number. Colin Pearson. Let's see here. Scott Tucker. Scotty Tucker. I don't know what time it is and down under in Australia, but I'm glad you're up and at 'em. It may be tomorrow morning there. I don't know. I'm glad to see you on board. Barb from Fresh Flow. Thanks for talking about aeration. You know what? Barb has been a long, long time supporter. And Fresh Flow can help you with a lot of stuff too. So you can friend her from this Facebook broadcast, or we've got the information on how to get in touch with all these good vendors that can help you design the very, very best aeration system that suited for your pond. Let's see here. I want to go back through some of these. Dick Tabbert says, can you have too much aeration? I am so glad you asked that. I've got that on my list of things to talk about. Let's see. Todd Austin's on board. Hello, we've got, looks like 36, 37 people that I know about. And I don't know who all's on here. All I know is the people that click on it and say like. Look at there, Scott Lindsay, he just sent an email. I'm stoked to win a hat and coffee mug. So now we've got his address. Carson Seville, hey Bob, what about a pond with no power or electricity to run? Are there other options, solar or battery operated? You know what, I'll get into that. That's a good question. But the answer is yes, there is. First of all, I want to talk about the concepts of aeration. Aeration really in the pond management, especially the recreational pond management business, hasn't been around that long. I'm going to tell you 20 years, tracks back into the 90s, and aeration of ponds really came in from the wastewater management business. Wastewater has got to be aerated tremendously to be able to get it to the point where they can release that water back into the streams and rivers. So aeration has been a big, big deal in wastewater management, but now it's transcended that and it's in the pond management business. And there's a bunch of different ways to aerate. Now, first thing you got to figure out is, do you need it? Well, I'm going to tell you, you need pond aeration for several accounts. If you've got an old pond that you want to keep reviving, keep it moving, then yes, it's a good idea. But if you're going to push a pond beyond its natural limits, aeration is a good idea. And I'll tell you something, aeration is a pretty good insurance policy against that 15 to 30 minute window of time where you could lose everything you've got because of circumstances with the weather, with temperatures. And I'll take you through all that here in a minute. Let's see, Lydia Jacobs North has joined in. Fred Bingaman, great to be online. Hey, Fred, if you're like me, it's great to be anywhere. Aeration, there are really just a handful of types. You know, it kind of started with fountains. You know, fountains are beautiful, and that's their job. Their job is to be beautiful, to blow a bunch of water up in the air, light packages. You know, I mean, how many suburban ponds do you see that have beautiful fountains or at the golf course? You know, fountains look cool. They don't aerate very well because they don't draft deep enough. Because remember that water stratifies in the summer. You've got a warm layer of water sitting on top of a cold layer of water. That cold layer of water in the summer is devoid of oxygen. You know, so that's the way God intended it to be. But if you're going to push the limits, you want to be able to mix that water. So if you have a fountain that's drafting only 2 or 3 feet deep, that's the only water that's going to get moved. Here's another concept about aeration. Aeration it's kind of a misnomer in my mind, because what aeration truly does is it moves water enough to be able to contact the atmosphere. That's what aerates water. Water's like a sponge. It's going to give off excess gases that absorb the gases that it needs. So when an aeration system can move the water to contact the atmosphere, that's when it's going to contact the air to absorb oxygen and release carbon dioxide, release sulfur, release the gases that are involved in the natural processes of composting or decomposing organic waste. So you have fountains, they're circulators. I've got several clients in my pond management company that have circulators, and the main thing circulators do is move water horizontally and keeps it moving, kind of like a river, creates currents. So there's times that horizontal aeration is a good move, especially if you've got a smaller body of water and you need to create some circular currents. That kind of stuff's a good thing. I just noticed Trana Madonna Smith. Hey, Trana. Let's see. Don Winterowd. Robert Todd Dillard. Love the info you give. Well, thank you very kindly. And let's see. Okay, Fred wants to know at what temperature should you start an aerator? You know what? I'm going to get into that too. The third type of aeration system is diffused bottom aeration. What that basically is high volume air under low pressure pushed down through diffusers through a manifold that sits on the bottom, and it creates bubbles. The diffuser breaks the bubbles up into tiny little micro. It looks like Alka-Seltzer for all you old heads that know what that is. So what the bottom diffused aeration systems do is they cascade those bubbles up through the water column, which in essence doesn't really aerate the water, but it takes that bottom water and shoves it to the surface. So aeration is, you have several choices. You can use a fountain. That's more for pretty. You can use circulators to create horizontal motion. Now some circulators, you can actually adjust them and tilt them to where they'll shove water down. So you can take water from the height and push it down, or you can take those circulators, flip them over, sink them in the bottom of the pond, and push that bottom water up so it can mix with that warm layer sitting on top. So the main mission for aeration is to mix water. And if you've got the right kind of system, you can do that. Now, here's the catch. Every pond needs a little bit different aeration system. So one of my favorite things about the majority of our vendors in the Pond Boss Resource Guide, John, I know his company. I know what they do. They'll go design an aeration system for you. You know, so will the other vendors, Vertex, Casco. They have people on staff. Fresh Flow, same thing. They have people on staff that will work with you to design the best system for you. Outdoor Water Solutions, same story. So you bet, absolutely. And that's what you need. Now I'm going to give you a little story here, and then I'll circle back and start answering some of these questions. I had a client one time wanted to buy an aeration system for a 120-acre lake in East Texas. So I said, you know what? If we're going to do that, it's going to take this many compressors, it's going to take this many diffusers, and they didn't want to spend that much money. So I came back there one day. I'd been gone about 4 months from there. I came back to that ranch, and I look and I see 4 diffusers bubbling water from the deepest part of the lake. And what they'd done is they decided to aerate about 1/10 of that lake, maybe 12 acres. Well, what they basically did was they kept sucking up the water below the thermocline and pushing it to the surface and causing a toxic scenario where that water that was below the thermocline all across the lake, and that colder water was migrating toward the aeration system. So the aeration system was insufficient, undersized to do a good job. So an aeration system really, really does need to be designed for your lake and for your depth and for your area of the country, and then designed to be operated based on what your goals are. And these vendors will do that for you. And now on the other hand, one of the questions I saw earlier was, can you over-aerate? Well, I wasn't sure about that, but now I am. We've got a client with a 10-acre lake, and in Texas, there's so many guys that will say, hey, you know, if one is good, 3 is better. Well, another company designed an aeration system for him before we took him on as a management client, and he ended up not only buying that system from them, but buying another one exactly like it straight from the vendor and installed it himself. So what happened was he started running these aeration systems, and what ended up happening was he was moving water so fast that the temperature of the water became pretty much what the ambient temperature was, or the average temperature was of that day. So in the summertime, when in Texas, he's around Fort Worth, Texas, in the summertime, when our highs are in the upper 90s, low 100s, and the temperature only drops down to maybe 82 at night, the water temperature was 87 degrees from the top to the bottom. Well, he called me one day in August. He says, hey, I'm starting to lose a few fish. So I said, well, tell me what you're losing. He says, well, it's my biggest bass, and they're only 3 years old. So that's when I said, well, let's take some temperature profiles. So he's got a dock, and he's got a full-time guy on staff that works there. So we had him checking the temperatures 3 times a day. That temperature was 87 degrees every single time he checked it. So what I had him do was turn off one of the systems, put the other system on a timer, and only run it from 9 at night till 9 in the morning. Well, it took about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, the temperature dropped from 87 degrees down to 83 degrees. And that was enough to stop the fish from dying. So yes, you can over-aerate, because remember, one of the things that God did was he created thermal refuges for fish. Now, in an earlier broadcast, I talked about some bass that had been tagged in one of these lakes, studying the movements, and those bass, they get right down in that thermocline in a natural lake, and even though the oxygen levels are just barely above their lower lethal where they can suffocate, they choose that 5 or 6 degree cooler water than the warmer water that has more oxygen. So temperature makes a difference, so be smart about how you aerate. Let's take a look at some of these questions here. Jessica O'Neill. Morning, everybody. It's morning where Jessica is. Let's see. I want to go back and look at some of these questions here. Can you have too much aeration? Yes, you can. I just hit that. Colin Pearson. Been waiting for this one. Attaboy. Hey, Barb, if you've got some input, type it in there. And share some things with people. Let's see here. Check out what else we got here. Other questions. I'm scrolling down, looking at these questions. At what temperature should you restart your aerator? Fred Bingman, that's a good question. When should you restart your aeration system? Well, I like to tell people to restart the aeration system right around 60 degrees. Now, here's the deal. You got to be really, really smart on how you do that, because we've been looking at ponds here in North Texas that are stratified already, and the top of the water is 58 degrees, the bottom of the water is 50. Well, you could pretty well bet that lower layer of water is always already becoming devoid of oxygen. So what you don't want to do, especially if you have a bottom-diffused aeration system, is you don't want to kick it on and leave it on because it starts kicking up that anoxic water from the bottom. Anoxic means without oxygen. So it starts taking that water that's toxic for fish and starts shoving it to the top. When it does that and mixes with that healthy, vibrant layer on the top, then you can cause an oxygen depletion and kill some fish. So what most vendors and manufacturers recommend is start your aeration system off at about 15 minutes the first day and then double it every day until you're running it 24/7. Now, if you live in a hot part of the country and you think temperature could be an issue, if you run it at least 12 hours a day, you're going to keep that thermocline and the stratification from occurring. So run it at least 12 hours a day, but start it off at 24 hours. Get 15 minutes, 30, 60, 2 hours, 4 hours on up over a period of 2 weeks or whatever it takes to get it going and get it started. And then once you're running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, keep doing that until you get to the hot part of the year. Now, other people are going to tell you something different. I'm basing mine on experience of what we've seen with our lake managers. Now, some of these other pros that know more about it than me may tell you something different. But that's what I'm going to tell you, and I'm pretty confident in telling you that. Let's see some more questions here. Somebody asked, go back here, somebody said, what if we don't have electricity? Well, you know, there are several good companies that manufacture solar-powered aeration. Of course, when you get one that's solar-powered, the sun's got to shine. Now, the more batteries you buy to store that electricity, the more it's going to cost. You know, I was looking at some of these solar-powered aeration systems, even as short as 5 to 10 years ago. They were really expensive, you know, almost cost prohibitive compared to the value of the fishery. But that's changing. And there's several companies, get the Pond Boss resource guide and start calling folks and talking to them about it. And they'll tell you the current state. Now, the wind-driven aeration systems are pretty good. Now, I think they're a little bit limited to the volume of air that they can push down based on how deep your pond is. But yes, like Outdoor Water Solutions, they're a long-time friend of Pond Boss, and I believe in those guys. Their wind-driven aeration systems, now they'll sit down and work with you, you know, to design a wind-driven aeration system. Another cool thing about some of the wind-driven ones is if you've got electricity nearby, when the wind blows, it'll kick on, but when the wind stops, then the electric compressor will kick on. So you can save a few dollars in electrical bills at the end of the month. Let's see, Brian Lawrence, will early aeration reduce water temperatures in the spring, messing with early spawns? That's why I'm telling people don't start your aeration. That's one reason I'm telling people don't start your aeration system till about 60 degrees. Because when the water hits 60 degrees, that's when the activity really starts kicking up, especially in warm water ponds where fish grow. So that's why you don't want to kick it on earlier than that. Let's see here. John Funk, hello from mid-Michigan. Hey, remember, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Put that in the comments section. Click like, share the video. $35 a year, Pond Boss. This is the economy that fuels what we do so I can come talk to you on Wednesday nights. Speaking of that, mark your calendars. I had a pretty cool thing happen this week. I got a call from our friends at Purina Mills, who are now a sponsor of this broadcast. They've invited me to come to the Purina Research Farm May 21st, which is a Monday, and they want to do a Facebook Live broadcast from the dock on their farm where they just renovated a 6-acre lake. It's very cool. That lake, you can imagine a lake on a farm that's been there 75 years. They drained it, renovated it, we've restocked it. We're going to have some of their researchers come on and bring you up to date on what's going on with fish foods. They're going to talk about the product lineup, and hopefully you're going to see some fish feed there at the Purina Farm May 21st, so write that down. Tim Steiner, do you know where I could find a quality American-made aerator? I love that idea. I'll tell you what, send us your address. We'll send you this guide, and you can start calling every one of them and talking to them about it. Some are American-made. I don't know the answer to that question. What I'm more concerned about is the quality of the products. And I've worked with every one of these vendors that we have, and I love them. I love their customer service. I love their products. I love their attitudes about what they do. I love the passion that they all bring to the table to help people. So I don't know how to tell you whether it's made in America or not. You're going to need to ask them. And I get it. I got you. Let me scroll back down and see make sure I'm not missing any questions here because I want to cover them all. Let's see here. Michael Parker joined in. Hi, Michael. Jason Hoffman, wondering if it would be an issue to place a diffuser anywhere but the center of our 1 acre pond. Only have access to a place at about 80 feet from one end. It's 400 feet long. You know what? I would call several of the vendors and just talk to them about it. Now, here's what they'll do. They will get online with you on Google Earth and look at your pond. And then they'll ask you the depths, and they will engineer what you need. Now, the thing about these diffusers is you can buy longer weighted tubing to get it out farther if you need to. A 1 acre pond, I'm not smart enough to tell you how many diffusers you need, but I'm going to tell you that I bet you probably need 2 to 3 diffusers. Now, do they have to be in the deepest or in the center? No, they don't. Where they need to be is where they can circulate as much water as possible. And there are some scientific calculations, some engineering calculations where they can study how much water that you would move. And as a matter of fact, we've got some lakes under management where we won't put diffusers in the very deepest because we want that thermal refuge where fish can escape down if they need to where, especially in the hot summers we have here in Texas. So I think that's a good option. Hey, Robert Geeson, good to see you, buddy. Jessica O'Neill says this conversation has been a huge eye-opener. Well, me too. Let's see. Scott Lindsay, no power near my pond. Any option? I just covered that. Don and Brooke Winterroud, are you better off to turn over your pond once every 24 hours or size your system to turn your pond over every 12 hours than just run at night? 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. The main thing is that you want the water, as much water as you can, to contact the atmosphere. See, water absorbs oxygen only from 2 sources. One is photosynthesis from plants. That could be plankton. That could be what makes your water be green. And that only occurs during sunlight. So if you don't have sunlight, you've got cloudy days, the plants you have are absorbing oxygen, creating carbon dioxide through respiration. But if sunlight hits it, then they're going to photosynthesize and create more oxygen. Then the other option is for the water to touch the atmosphere to release gases and absorb gases from the atmosphere. So turning it over once every 24 hours or once every 12 hours, I don't know the difference there. I really don't. My gut is going to say that if you can turn that pond over every 12 hours and only run it at night, that could be a pretty smart thing because that helps you, especially if you're in the South. Now, the Midwest, not quite as important. Hello, Tim Cook. Jim Liner, glad to see you, buddy. Let's see here. Anthony Abate. At what size, acre-wise, does it become a moot point to provide artificial aeration? I imagine at a certain point, what we can provide gets absorbed by the sheer size of the body of water. I think that's a fair statement. What I'm looking at more than that, though, Anthony, is how much is that pond trying to produce? Are you trying to push it past its limit? If you are, then aeration could be, even though it could be expensive for a big body of water, how much are the fish worth if they die? If you've got 20 years worth of fish in there and you have a 30-minute oxygen, hold your breath for 30 minutes and see what happens. Oh, you can't. You die. Fish do too. So really what aeration does, it does a couple of really important things. One is it's continually moving water to touch the atmosphere, not only to absorb oxygen, but to expedite its ability to process waste. So the more waste it can process faster, the healthier that pond becomes. I remember having a conversation with Dr. Dave Willis, my very best friend that we lost a few years ago up in South Dakota, and we were kind of commiserating the fact that they can't manage some of the prairie potholes up in South Dakota. Well, part of the problem is this thing called winter kill. Well, as we talked, we thought, if we could develop some ways to aerate those ponds and help them cleanse themselves through the warmer months, then would we increase our odds of minimizing winter kill? We think we can. You know, now, nobody's tried that yet that I know of. I know there's some experiments going on. Looks like Stephen Barden's checking in. Hey, Stephen, glad to see you. Texas Pro Lake Management, Stephen Barden's on board. Check him out. He's in the Pond Boss Resource Guide as well. Send us your address. We'll send you a resource guide and a copy of the magazine. $35 a year, folks. Also, we also have a bunch of books and things. So if you need information, Pond Boss is your go-to source for information from anything from building ponds to stocking ponds to dealing with the runaway plants to aeration that we're talking about tonight. Let's see here. At what size, Anthony says, you know, I don't know. I think it becomes a moot point based on the value of the fishery and the value of the lake. You know, it would probably cost somewhere north of $30,000 to aerate a 150-acre lake. But it would cost somewhere north of $80,000 to restock it as it was when the fish died. You know, and that $40,000, you can spread $30,000, whatever it is, you can spread that out over a 15-year period. So you're really buying an insurance policy for that lake. Let's see here. Hey, Colin Pearson, 1 year old, 3/4 acre pond in South Dakota. We were just talking about that. With a small island, I left 2 diffusers going all winter. Is it 60 degrees for the places that don't see ice? No, it's really not. It's for places that do see ice. I don't really like to aerate ponds all winter long, and here's why. When ice forms on a pond in South Dakota, you may have 6 inches, you may have 18 inches. Well, below that, the water temperature is about 39 or 40 degrees. So that temperature insulates your fish from that frigid air that caused the ice in the first place. So if you're aerating and your ice stays open, then your water gets really, really cold, and I think that has just as negative an impact. Now, what I have seen people do that I think is pretty smart, if you can scale your aeration system back and kick it on, so when I say scale it back, decrease the volume so you don't open the ice. If you can aerate under ice without opening the ice, that's when I think you have the best of both worlds. Now, I'm being a little theoretical because I don't know if that's really practical. Jim Liner from Montgomery, Alabama. Great advice to call the vendors. They should know their products well. Yes, they do, and I have a lot of faith in them. You know, it's you know, one of the things that might bother people is, well, gosh, if I call a vendor, they're wanting to sell me something. Well, if they sell you something and it doesn't work, how good is that? And that's one of the things I love about our vendors. Barb, you know, Vertex, Casco, John, all those guys. They want you to succeed. So they're going to create something, design something, and help you find what will work best for your situation. And I applaud that. So I think that's good. Brian Lawrence, best way to determine how long a system takes to turn over one time. Now that's what the engineers figure out. I don't know the answer to that. But what I know is they can calculate the mass of air that comes through the water and the spacing of your diffusers and help figure out how long it takes to turn a pond over. And all the good vendors know how to do that. So visit with them. I grow big fish and do these podcasts. So I don't know how that works. I depend on them. I really do. When we get ready to buy an aeration system, we call one of the vendors that are in this Pond Boss Resource Guide. You know, we might call 3 or 4 of them and say, hey, we got this system we're working on. Help us figure out the best one. And then we'll present that to the landowner. The landowner gets to make a decision, and then here we go. So that's, I don't know how long a system takes to turn over one time. Depends on the volume of air, the depth of the water, and the size of the pond. Let's see, Kenneth C. DeWagons. Hey, love these video talks. Are you aware of any reservoirs that have no fishing areas that are aerated during the summer for stripers? I've only heard of it, but I don't know which reservoirs. I do not. I don't pay any attention to public reservoirs, other than what just passes through me, which, you know, I'm spending all my time pretty much on private waters. So I don't know any of those, but I'll tell you this. If you're going to have hybrid striped bass, and of course you asked about stripers, but I'm talking about hybrid stripers. Aeration is pretty important. Hybrid stripers don't like it hot. And that's a topic for another conversation. But let me tell you this. different species of fish have different temperature requirements. Hybrid stripers are a lot less tolerant of warmer water than bluegill are, for example. Florida strain largemouth bass, they don't like warm water. Largemouth bass, as a general rule, they don't like it. Well, when I say Florida bass don't like it, Florida bass are more tolerant of it than northern largemouth bass. But largemouth bass just don't really like water above 85, 86, 87 degrees. Let's see here. Jeff Brown. I'm building a mini pond, 1/8 of an acre. How much area should be deep or shallow? You know, Jeff, I'm going to tell you this. It depends on where you live. If you tell me you're in New Mexico, you need water 15 to 20 feet deep just so it won't go dry. Depth is important for storage capacity. The more rain you have, the more runoff you have, the less depth you need. You know, if you look at a hatchery pond, hatchery ponds are 3.5 to 5.5 feet deep. You don't have to have depth to grow fish. You know, so rather than dance around this question, I'm going to tell you an 1/8 acre pond, you need probably 30% at its deepest, whatever that is. Then you need probably another 30% of a medium depth. And then another 20% of at least 3 to 4 feet. Then the rest of that, whatever that adds up to, I think I got 15 or 20% left. That can be water that's 3-to-1 slope going up to the shallow part. Let's see, John Wilson. You know, John, I'm so glad you're on board. If you guys want to talk about pond management, especially in the upper Midwest, go find John Wilson, Aquatic. That guy is brilliant, and he is surrounded by so many smart people. You know, John, you and I have been friends a long time. You have people smarter than you, which makes you smart. So he's got this team around him that can help. So just a good shout out to John. Nick Sierra, hi from Northwest Arkansas. Outdoor Water Solutions. We've been talking about you, Nick. I've been kind of doing a little shout out about wind-driven aeration, talking a little bit about solar aeration. Nick Sierra, guys, if you see him on here, he can answer a bunch of questions too. John Wilson can answer. Barb can answer. Nick can answer. Stephen Barton can help. Lake Whitney's where he's hanging out today. Chris Burks from North Carolina. Scott Lindsay is saying Lake Greenwood, South Carolina aerates about 1/4 mile at the dam. Now that's brilliant. I'm glad to hear that. Lake Greenwood, which is a public lake. All right, throw me some more questions. Otherwise, I'm going to have to just kind of start making some stuff up. You know, I want to tell you about some aeration systems and some of the mistakes that people make. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is not starting one up right. You have got to, okay, Stephen says Lake Whitney aerates. Okay, that's pretty cool. Hey, Stephen, tell us a little bit about that. Do they aerate around the dam? Lake Whitney is on the Brazos River. Lake Whitney is famous for golden algae. So they have, on occasion, they'll have some fish kills. So I'm glad to hear that they do some aeration. I don't know anything about it because I don't pay attention to it, but I'd like to hear more about it, Stephen. Matt Arrington, Brownwood, Texas. Hey, Matt. Let's see here. Kenneth Dwagons. We have albino cats and albino fathead minnows. What about other species? I'm not sure what you're asking me, but can you have other species? Sure. You know, and everybody's goals are different. I want to circle back. Let's see. Stephen says at the dam to improve the water quality. Well, good. Now, I would presume that they're aerating at the dam to improve water quality, not only for the fishery, but probably because somebody drinks that water. Of course, the Brazos River, let's see, okay, they're trying to get rid of hydrogen sulfide. Good. That's a good reason to do that. John Wilson, thanks, Bob. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Reminder, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section. Share this video, please. And click like. Kenneth, do they raise them, sell them? Be neat to have a pond full of albinos. Oh, yeah. You know, I'm not sure where you are, but there are some suppliers that sell albinos. Now, the albino fatheads, they call them rosy reds. Here's something kind of cool. There was a fish hatchery back in the 80s, and I remember when this happened. They came across, it was a fish hatchery in Arkansas that raised some tropical fish, but mostly goldfish, to sell in a tropical fish market. So a bunch of the fancy goldfish, big tails, you know, colorful fish, bubble eyes, things like that. They came across a couple of albino fathead minnows, and they culled them out of their minnows, And that's where the rosy reds started. So they breed true. So they started to breed those, and now throughout part of the South and the Southwest, you can buy what they call rosy reds. Those are albino fathead minnows. Some people sell albino channel cats, but that's kind of a little bitty teeny niche market. I know that Nate Herman Brothers in Peoria, Illinois sell a bunch of those. Okay, Jessica says, I don't have a pond, just intrigued to learn more about fish and fish habitat that may help me catch more fish. That's a good reason to learn it, because the more you can learn about the habits of fish, the chances increase that you're going to catch more of those fish. So I like that. Jason Luster Wildlife, good to see you in fisheries. Jason is an outstanding fisheries biologist as well. So throw some more questions at me. Some of the pitfalls of aeration, like I said earlier, is don't start it up right. If you don't start that system up properly, you run a big risk of killing every fish in your pond. So do what those manufacturers tell you. When you start that aeration system, start it off 15 minutes today, 30 minutes tomorrow, an hour the next day, 2 hours, and within a couple of weeks, it's going full bore. Because if you take all that bottom water, even this time of year, if you take the bottom water and shove it to the top too fast, then you can create a toxic environment where you take all the natural toxins that are sitting on the bottom of the lake, shove them up into the top, and kill fish. Because water's going to do what it needs to do to get rid of that stuff. It ain't going to think about the fish. It's going to do what it does. Let's see. Chris Rigoni just grabbed my Pond Boss magazine out of the mailbox. Sweet. Give it a read. Let us know what you think about it. Scott Lindsay. Filamentous algae has invaded my pond. The fish seem fine, but it's early. Afraid to start fertilizing. Algaecide or tilapia? Well, Scott, if I recall, you're in South Carolina. If tilapia are legal, now, let me tell you this. We use Mozambique strain tilapias in Texas, and they do an outstanding job to clean up algae, and they do it pretty fast. Now, here's the catch. When the water temperature is 52 degrees, they die. So we wait until our water temperatures are in the mid-60s before we stock any tilapia, and that's because we don't want to have one of these little cold fronts blow through, shove the temperature down, and kill the fish. Now, what about the rates? Well, in order to control tilapia, I think you need them at least at 10 pounds per acre, where the fish are 3 or 4 to the pound. So if they're a third of a pound or a quarter of a pound or a little bigger, that's what you need to stock. And here's the deal on that. Their babies are the ones that are going to really start to control the algae. So once they begin to reproduce, that's when we see the most effective control of algae via tilapia. Now, if you want to use an algaecide while it's still cool, that's fine. Now remember, in these broadcasts before, I've talked about plants. Plants need 3 things to grow. They need the right temperature, they need food, and they need sunlight. When those 3 things come together, plants are going to grow. Each plant species has its own window of temperature. Just so happens filamentous algae like it cool. And they'll start off cooler, and that filamentous algae, most species have a tendency to go away when the water temperature gets warm. So, tilapia, let's see. If you're afraid to start fertilizing, check your water temperature. Buy a thermometer. That's what I'm going to tell everybody to do. Check your temperature. When your water temperature is above 55 going up, you can fertilize. Now, you may not get a bloom for 10 days or 2 weeks. Now, of course, if you've got rain in the forecast, don't fertilize if there's rain coming and there's a chance that it will be washed out of the system. So don't just discount fertilizer just because you think it's too cool. I've gotten some blooms going at 58 and 60 degrees. Buy a thermometer, start checking your temperature, write it down. Check it same place, same time every day, because if you check it in the morning, it's going to be different than if you check it at 6 o'clock in the evening. Let's see. Gene Smith, I have a small half-acre pond, spring-fed in northeast Oklahoma with a slimy moss problem. Will aeration help? Yes. Now, here's another key point about aeration. I'm so glad you asked that question. That's a great question. What aeration does, another thing, not only does it move the water and keep it circulating vertically to where it can interact with the atmosphere, it also creates autonomous chemistry and autonomous quality, top to bottom. So in essence, what happens is it keeps the nutrients moving, which makes a pond more inclined to have a plankton bloom rather than rooted vegetation. Now, there is a caveat. Once you have plants growing up from the bottom, whether they're filamentous algae, pond weeds, or any other of the native plants, aeration isn't going to kill it. What aeration will do is keep the water moving. So if you've got water moving now and you've got filamentous algae growing, what you will do is you'll suspend enough of those nutrients, especially if you've got a system designed to move water in the area where you've got the algae growing. Once it dies, then your odds of it coming back go down. But aeration in itself won't kill the plants. It will help prevent plants. Matt Arrington, my pond is new and dirty. Will aeration help, hurt, or make no difference in the natural clearing of the water? It will make no difference. When you start aerating a pond that's turbid, here's what I would do. I would be sure my diffusers are not helping push water up that have mud around it. So in other words, some of these diffusers sit off the bottom. Some of them sit on big plexiglass plates. Get a diffuser that doesn't cause water to move up and pick up mud as it goes. Now it's not going to expedite the cleansing. It's not going to expedite cleansing, meaning, let me change that word. It's not going to expedite the way that a pond clears up. It might even slow it down a little bit. Depends on how much you move the water. So don't count on an aeration system to clear up a muddy pond. At the very best, it will be moot about that. What it will do is move the water so it can contact the atmosphere. All right, let's see. Here comes Jessica O'Neill again. I don't have a pond. I have freshwater tanks at home, 5 foot long, 3.5 foot deep. Do you apply similar aeration principles as this type? Yeah, you can. Same like an aquarium. Think of an aquarium. If you've got air stones and you want to try to keep fish alive in those freshwater tanks, think like an aquarium. That's what you're trying to do there. Okay, so Kenneth says, so I do a lot of volunteer work with Pheasants Forever here in Ohio. Pheasants Forever is working hand in hand, planting prairie all around the Great Lakes to eat up the phosphorus with farmers. Have you seen any private landowners benefit from this in their watershed for their own pond? Absolutely. One of the things we do when we counsel our clients is to study the watershed. You know, if they're in an agricultural part of the country, especially where the majority of the water runs off from the surface, I'll qualify that in a minute, we want them to have a good buffer zone of prairie grasses that feed into that pond. So those prairie grasses can capture as much phosphorus as possible. Now, on the other side of my mouth, I'm going to tell you that in the South, phosphorus is the #1 limiting nutrient to prevent a pond from having a plankton bloom. Now, in the South, it's different than the Midwest and even the North. In the Midwest, you've got a lot more issues with phosphorus because you've got a lot of acres of corn, sunflowers, wheat that are being fertilized. And when that happens, and the farmers have a tendency to fertilize at least as much as they need, sometimes a little bit more. When it rains, oftentimes that phosphorus, some of the plants will take up some of it, but some of it will migrate down and then move laterally into the watersheds. And that's kind of what you're talking about. Kenneth Rust just joined in. Hey, Kenneth, I had a shout out to you earlier in the day. So early in the broadcast, talking about Louisiana pond management aeration. Kenneth used to work for Casco, so Ken Rust can help out as well. So Kenneth Dwiggins, the answer to that is absolutely yes. We do work with landowners to improve their watersheds. We think that's really, really important. Brian Lawrence says, if cold fronts like we recently had come through and start dropping water temperature back in the 50s, should you keep the systems going at the same time? Yes. Once you start your aeration system, keep it going. Just because the water temperature drops into the 50s don't mean it'll stay there. You know, I like to wait till the temperature's around 60, then kick it on and do like we talked about, do the right startup things, but leave it going. Leave it going until the water temperatures get high, and then talk about it. Think about it. If you're in South Texas, the middle of Florida, you know, South Louisiana, whatever, you need to have your own protocol. Work with your pond pro to figure out the best way to run an aeration system, and work with these vendors. If you don't have a copy of the resource guide, I know we have a lot of new viewers looking. If you don't have a copy of the Pond Boss resource guide, send an email to info@pondboss.com. There you go. Or give us a call at the office. Send us your address. We will send you one of these. resource guides. Scott Tucker from Victoria. Hey, Scotty, glad to see you back on. He wants one of these. We'll send that to you. Okay, let's see here. Ken Russ says, howdy. Okay, we got that. Anybody have any more questions about aeration systems? Pretty well talked it through. You know, I will tell you one story. Here's a cool story. I've got a client west of Fort Worth, Texas, and what he did was, and you can read about him in Pond Boss and back issues, Ron Morgan is his name. Well, he bought a piece of property, 30 acres, that has a creek that's horseshoe shaped that runs around the middle of his property. Well, in the horseshoe, he wanted to build a house. Well, he wanted to get out of the floodplain, so he dug a couple of big holes in the front yard and turned them into ponds. So then along this creek, he built some weirs. There's 4 of them. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, there's 5 of them. So he's got 5 little pools in this horseshoe bend of the creek. And he's got these 2 small ponds that are so small, they're about as 3 times as big as a pickup truck, to kind of give you an idea. And then he drilled a few wells. So with the weirs, the little dams that he built, he takes some well water, flushes it through the creek, and rainfall does this as well. Well, the creek circulates around the weirs, then he picks water up at the last puddle, the last hole, and then pumps it into these 2 ponds, and then lets it go through those ponds, overflows through some artificial wetlands, and flows back in the creek. Well, in those pools in the creek, 3 of those pools are at least 1/10 of an acre. One of them is probably 1/3 of an acre. He's bought several of these circulators. He bought Casco circulators, and they float. Well, he didn't want them to float, so the little floats, he took those, opened them up, filled them full of concrete, turned them upside down, and put them in the creek. So what he does when the creek is flowing, he can turn on his circulators and create a counter current that pushes water upstream, and then the water circulates. And that is a fish magnet. Fish flock to those circulators. And it also helps him manage nutrients. It also allows him to have the maximum aeration that he can have there, because he's also got bottom-diffused aeration. So you can be pretty creative with the way that you aerate a pond. Let's see, Kenneth Dwigens, he says, just a heads up to others that maybe you can give some insight into your experience. Promoting dragonflies keeps mosquitoes down. Yeah, I've talked about that as well in the past. I haven't done it today. When we're designing a new lake, one of the things we do in our pond and lake design is we implement and create habitat for dragonfly nymphs, strictly so we can grow more dragonflies, not only to have the insects to feed the fish, the bigger fish, but also so we can have dragonflies because they eat mosquitoes. You know, here where we are, and probably where you are, there's the Zika virus, and there's West Nile. So we want to get rid of as many mosquitoes as we can. Let's see here. Dick Tabbert says, I guess when water gets too warm in the summer, running in the evening would be better. Running in the evening and overnight would be better if it gets hot. Jim Liner, I've documented our water temperature weekly for years. It's very helpful. That's exactly right. If you're a serious pond meister, check your water temperatures, because that is real helpful. Not only is it helpful to, so you'll know, it's helpful when you're catching fish. It's helpful when you see fish feeding. Tyler Stubbs, you might have hit this earlier because I had to leave. What is a good depth to put a diffuser in small ponds? You know, I'll tell you this, Tyler. Tyler's a fisheries biologist as well. Our experience has been that we don't necessarily want to hit the deepest water, but if we can get it down 2/3 of the way, whatever that is, if there's a pond 15 feet deep, we want it down 10 feet. If we can do that, then we can minimize the risk of fish kills due to turnover. You know, and plus we can cleanse water deeper because typically the thermocline wants to sit halfway down. All right, let's see. Chris Blood, Texas Hunters. Hey, Chris, I was telling everybody that Texas Hunters is a fresh sponsor for this broadcast. We love you guys. And in my opinion, Texas Hunter, in the opinion of a lot of other people, Texas Hunter makes the best fish feeders on the market and wildlife feeders and other products, you know, deer blinds and road feeders and things. Just y'all go to TexasHunterProducts.com, I believe it is, and or go look up Texas Hunter Products. It'll take you to. Chris says, hey, Bob, how does aeration affect feeding fish, or does it? Well, aeration does affect feeding fish. It actually improves it, because when you're aerating the water and you've got autonomous water quality top to bottom, then that water stays consistent and feeding is enhanced. Now, where it doesn't help is when the water gets too hot. You know, fish, especially feed-trained largemouth bass, channel catfish to some extent, bluegills to some extent, when it gets hot, their feeding drops a little bit. So that's part of the reason I say that we really want to have some strategies on the way that we feed. All right, good question, Chris. Don Winterrout, how many pounds of fatheads might you harvest out of a 10th acre silt pond, aerated versus non-aerated? Well, out of aerated, you're going to get more. Now, this is kind of it's a multifaceted answer to a simple question. You got to have plenty of places for fatheads to spawn. You have to have food for them to eat. And if you've got a consistent environment in which they can live, then your productivity is going to go up. So aerated ponds, especially small silt ponds, you're going to get better results from an aerated pond because it helps keep the nutrients in suspension, which provides more food in the base of the food chain, which fathead minnows like to eat. Now, if you ask me about bass, I'll give you a different answer. Kenneth Russ, solar-powered aeration, windmill aeration are viable options. Yes, sir, we talked about that a little earlier in the broadcast. Glad you brought it up, and Kenneth can help as well. Scott Lindsay, still okay to fertilize even with algae? Thought it might make it worse. Here's the deal about fertilization. This is your take-home point. If you get your fertilizer mixed into the water column in the main body of the water to create the plankton bloom there, you won't be feeding the algae. So if you can create a plankton, like if we're going to go fertilize a pond or a lake where there is algae, we'll fertilize in the main body of the water the whole volume of fertilizer to do the whole lake. And the goal there is to create a plankton bloom quickly and then let it dissipate through the rest of the pond. That can work really, really well. Kenneth says, remote installation of a compressor and piping air to the pond is another way to get aeration to a pond without power. You can pump air up to a mile with a rocking piston compressor. Good point. We've got one of those clients in Memphis, Tennessee, where we have I think it's a 1,800 yard run of PVC pipe underground just to get to the lake. And we've got 3 compressors that run that 25 acre lake through that pipe. And it does a good job. Texas Hunter is the best, Kenneth says. Yes. John Wilson back on board. All right, folks. Good gosh, what a fast-paced hour. Who thought we could talk about aeration and a bunch of those things for a red solid hour? But we have. Now keep in mind, listen, tell your friends about Pond Boss. We want to get the word out. And if you have some friends that haven't seen the magazine, let me know. info@pondboss.com. Send us an email. Give us their address. We'll send them a copy of the magazine courtesy of you. And we just want to get the word out. We've got so much cool information that we want to share with everybody. And get your resource guide. Remember, #PondBossMagazine. Share the video. Click like. And that will enter you into a drawing for a Pond Boss cap and a Pond Boss mug. Our winner this week, Dick Tabbert. So Dick, we've got your address. That'll be coming to you. So listen, I want to thank everybody for joining us. And mark your calendars for May 21st. That'll be a Monday when I'll be at the Purina Research Farm. And we will be talking about feeding fish, interviewing. We'll have several guests, some of the some of the Purina nutritionists talking about their products. And you're going to get to see their lake. And by May 21st, their water ought to be warm enough that fish will be feeding like crazy. We've stocked hybrid striped bass, bluegill, red-ear sunfish, fathead minnows, trying to get the stage set to add some largemouth bass, and that'll be coming up here pretty quick. So I want to thank you once again for joining us tonight, and we'll be checking in with you next Wednesday. Uh-oh. I was going to try to play that little music thing for you, but it ain't working out. All right, that's it for today, and we will see you guys next week, 6:30 to 7:30 next Wednesday. Appreciate it. Adios.